Hello, my name is Margie Carrell, and I will be presenting my research on a policy for you. I chose to research RCW 6950315, Washington State's Medical Assistance Drug-Related Overdose Prosecution for Possession Law, otherwise known as a Good Samaritan Law. I am going to read the law for you. The law is written below as a person acting in good faith who seeks medical assistance for someone experiencing a drug-related overdose shall not be charged or prosecuted for possession of a controlled substance pursuant to RCW 6950-4013 or penalized under RCW 6950-4014. If the evidence for the charge of possession of a controlled substance was obtained as the result of the person seeking medical assistance. A person who experiences a drug-related overdose and is in need of medical assistance shall not be charged or prosecuted for possession of a controlled substance pursuant to RCW 6950-4013 or penalized under RCW 6950-4014. If the evidence for the charge of possession of a controlled substance was obtained as the result of the overdose and the need for medical assistance. This protection in this section from prosecution for possession crimes under RCW 6950-4013 shall not be grounds for suppression of evidence in other criminal charges. Benefits and implementation. The goal of this law is to save lives by reducing legal concerns and increasing calls for help during an overdose. If seeking medical assistance during an overdose, you are protected from prosecution for drug possession. Drug overdose is a leading cause of unintentional death in Washington State, and this law aims to reduce that. Overdoses often occur with another person present, therefore bystander intervention is key in saving someone's life. The person overdosing is also protected from being prosecuted for drug possession. Washington State was the second state to implement this law in 2010, and the law was amended in 2013 to include alcohol poisoning and underage youth. When surveyed, folks that used heroin were more likely to call 911 when they learned about this law. One peer-reviewed study I read that they were 88% more likely to call 911 once knowing about this law. Some barriers are lack of education around the law, risk of arrest for folks on parole or with outstanding warrants does not protect you in those cases. It does not protect you from charges for drug manufacturing, delivery of controlled substances, or homicide. Drugs are often confiscated. There is a lot of fear of police, and that continues to be a barrier for folks needing help. You must remain on the scene or nearby. The concerns about being on probation, parole, or having an active warrant have led some states to adopt broader immunity and protections like New Jersey and Hawaii have, while some states like Texas offer extremely limited protection, and the state responses vary greatly. Additionally, marginalized folks are more vulnerable because they face harsher charges from police and racism. Regarding the mistreatment of marginalized population and the reluctance to utilize this policy, some awareness needed is as follows. Studies show that there are disproportionate legal consequences for Black folks, including having dramatically higher incarceration rates. According to one study, incarceration is 5 to 7 times the rate of white folks, largely due to racial bias in the criminal justice system and the so-called war on drugs. Black folks are significantly more likely than white folks to be arrested for drug sales, even when statistically reporting the same rates of selling drugs. Studies show evidence that because of the result of drug offenses, around 80% of people in federal prison, and in addition, nearly 60% of people in state prison are racialized as Black or Latino. The law does not impact the racist and biased nature of police and criminal justice systems. And additionally, there are overdose disparities. So a resource from the CDC states that from 2019 to 2020, overdose deaths increased 44% for Black people and 39% for Indigenous people. And the CDC also states that treatment was lowest for Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous folks. So there are major disparities in regard to accessing treatment as well. Other jurisdictions, I did a little bit of research on New Jersey's law because it just has some broader protections, but it is 2C-35-30. The 911 caller and overdose victim are protected from arrest, charge, and prosecution for substance and or alcohol possession. There's also protection if on parole or probation. So that's one of the biggest differences I noticed. Also, based on circumstances, modification of these can still occur. So it's good to keep that in mind. Hawaii law shares the broader protections as well. And I added that law here to see if you're interested. Below is a good resource for understanding the different laws in other states. And that was a website I found called Safe Project. You can go there and you can see a breakdown of each state's law in regard to the Good Samaritan laws. The laws, again, they vary by state, and many require you to remain on the scene. Providing false information could disqualify you from protection in some states. Some states have even adopted a Bad Samaritan law, which includes Minnesota, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And so this is a duty to act because of legal obligation. You can have consequences if you fail to do so. How this policy impacts therapists is meeting people where they are by having conversations about overdose prevention, health and safety, or additional social services. The need to address root causes, including intergenerational trauma, empowering folks within their community to use harm reduction practices. I think a big part of our work is empowering folks. And also therapists can use this law during safety planning as well as other interventions like RCW 6941095, which is a legal right to carry and administer naloxone. Therapists should help advocate for broader protections in the name of harm reduction. Educating family members and clients on protections of this law could also increase the likelihood of folks seeking help. On the topic of harm reduction and why I think this law is ultimately helpful, even though it's complicated, right? Because there's so many systemic issues. I think that the law is helpful in reducing death from overdosing. I also believe that this law could adapt stronger protections so that people calling 911 do not have to fear arrest at all. I think that more awareness is key because law can be complicated to understand, as we've all realized as we've researched these different policies. After researching peer-reviewed work, it seems like the application of the law varies by state and how educated people are on the law. I read some peer-reviewed research where even responding officers weren't educated on how the law works. Overall reduction from death was seen, with statistics showing after 2 years of enacting both GSL, which is the Good Samaritan laws, and NAL, the naloxone laws, which make it legal to carry and administer, that there was a 7% decrease in death from overdoses. So that was a positive thing to read about. Therapists have a responsibility to educate themselves on cultural humility and decolonization. We need awareness of how marginalized populations are at higher risk, fueled by health and social inequities. These are my references. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to listening to everyone else's presentations. Thank you.